So welcome everybody to the last day of the IPROMO course. Good morning or good afternoon. Today there will be a two lecture section, and we will start for zooming into the Himalaya regions. I would like to and happy to welcome Dr. Abid Hussain from ICIMOD. He's a food security economist with more than 17 years of experience. He works in research and development and policy processes on food and nutrition security, mountain agricultural and biodiversity and climate change. So welcome again, Abid, and please, I give you the floor. Welcome to IPROMO. Can you hear me?
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, colleagues. So it's really a pleasure to deliver a lecture on Hindu Kush Himalayan region. So I have seen quite a few people, participants are from the region. So they're much aware of this region. It's called third pole of the world, or water tower also it's called, because of its importance in terms of water and the dependence of huge population on its water resources. Let's try to unfold or unpack Hindu-Kush Himalayan region's food security and food systems. Hindu-Kush Himalayan region, as I mentioned, very important region in terms of its water resources, particularly in the form of glaciers. So total geographical area of this region is 3.4 million square kilometer. It extends in 8 countries, right from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, India, Bhutan, China, Bangladesh, Myanmar. 8 countries, mountain and hilly areas are included in this region. So around 60,000 square kilometer area is covered by glaciers. We can imagine the number of glaciers we have in this region. And around 240 million population is accommodated in this region, and around 1.9 billion population is dependent on ecosystem services of this region, particularly water flowing through rivers to downstream areas. So let's try to understand food security. As we know, it's very common definition, very popular as well, FAO's 1996 definition. Food security exists when all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food, which meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. It looks like a statement. If we read one or two times, it seems very simple statement, but indeed it's very complex. Sometime when we encounter, I see the food security's outcome indicator, for example, nourishment or undernourishment, nutrition or malnutrition, or undernutrition or overnutrition. It looks like one or two indicators. But to achieve those indicators, there are tiers of determinants. There are several factors we have to see to achieve the sustainable outcome on those indicators. So let's see what are those things. So in next slide, I will explain those things. The determinants of food security are called dimensions of food security. We will see how those dimensions are placed under overall framework of food security. First, I would like to give you a little overview of Hindu-Kush Himalayan region's food security. 1/3 of population is food insecure in Hindu-Kush Himalayan region, and around half population is facing some form or any form of malnutrition. Around 30% population poor in the region. After sub-Saharan Africa, this is the second poorest or most food insecure region in the world. We can imagine the gravity of food insecurity in this region. As I mentioned, food security is very complex. That definition looked like one statement, but very complex. We'll see why that food security framework is very complex. So if we achieve food security, we can achieve several development goals. Goals related to agriculture, safe water, health, gender, equity, education, infrastructure, climate change, disaster risk reduction, poverty alleviation. Food security is multidimensional. It it covers a lot of things. Several goals or objectives or sub objectives of other development indicators. So that's why if we work on food security pathways, it can help to achieve other development objectives also. Let's try to understand multidimensionality of food security and mountain perspective. Mostly you hear from here, there, from researchers, from policymakers, that mountain food security is different in terms of nature and context compared to plain areas or general food security. We'll try to understand. So this multidimensional framework is based on our years of work in Hindu Kush Himalayan region. Let's try to understand the mountain context of food security. First, food security had four dimensions 1 or 2 years before, but in 2020, two more dimensions are suggested or added to food security. Those two new dimensions are sustainability and agency. These dimensions are actually suggested in a publication by high-level expert panel on food security. They have suggested sustainability and agency. Before this, sustainability was somehow, some way addressed under food stability dimension. Now it's separate dimension, and agency is another new dimension. All red highlighted text actually will help us to understand how mountain food security is different from plain food security and general food security. Under the dimension of food availability, food production of niche products from plants, animals, insects, and other sources. Mainly in plain areas, agricultural land holdings are big, and commercial farming we can observe. A scale of production is also bigger. But in mountain areas, in pockets, or in values, in terraces on mountain areas, niche products on small scale, very specific, mountain specific products are being grown. Crops, livestock, we can also consider livestock as a mountain niche product, because in high altitude mountain areas, livestock is also very specific, yak, that cannot be raised in plain areas. So mountain products are niche. Mainly agriculture is subsistence. In Hindu Kush Himalayan region, scale of production is very small and products are niche. Another thing, food movement. So mostly if we talk about in national level food security, we talk about the food trade from one country to another country, movement of food. But when we talk about mountain areas, we have to consider this food movement from plain areas to mountain areas. It really matters. How it matters, we will see in stability dimension. Then food trade, of course, if nationally governments are importing food, of course, it will enter the supply chain, which will be supplied to mountain areas also. Then food accessibility. Three types of sub-dimensions are here: economic access, physical access, and social access. Physical access is very important in mountain areas because mountain areas are distant, remote. In most of the mountain areas, we don't have that good connectivity which we have in plain areas. So physical access is very unique in mountain areas, very much different compared to plain areas. Then economic access, then social access. Especially in Hindu Kush Himalayan region, this social access is very important. For example, couple of Muslim countries, they do not prefer to consume pork, and countries where communities will not prefer to consume beef. So that's why social access and considering the cultural acceptability of food is very important in Hindu Himalayan region. Then food utilization, of course, food variety and dietary diversity are very common, as in the case of national food security, food security in plain areas. But health issues, health infrastructure, health facilities are very, very marginal in mountain areas of Hindu Himalayan region. So these arrows are very important. Three dimensions are cross-cutting: food stability, sustainability, and agency. Not only these three dimensions are cross-cutting, affecting all other three dimensions, utilization, accessibility, and availability, they are also cross-cutting to each other. For example, anything happening in agency may affect stability. Anything happening in stability and sustainability can affect agency. Similarly, stability and sustainability are also having causality and reverse causalities, cross effects, and cascading effects also. Food stability. This is much more important in mountain areas to understand because mountain specificities, limited accessibility, fragility, and marginality are very important characteristics of mountain areas. As I mentioned in physical access of food, physical access of food is sometimes very difficult in mountain areas because of mountain specificities. Sometimes because of some hazard, if bridge is affected, if road is broken, if some landslide happen, for days or for weeks, stability of food in that area, mountain area, upstream areas where we are trying to supply food may be affected. Then seasonality in mountain areas. I would like to give example of high altitude mountain areas where in winter, because of heavy snowfall, roads are blocked. We cannot have access to those areas, right? In monsoon also, because of landslides or risks of landslide, mostly the transportation from plain areas to mountain areas is affected. So seasonality is very important. It's not the case in plain areas, most of the plain areas. Another thing, in cultivation also seasonality important. See, here I'm talking about cultivation. It means it's cross-cutting and it's related to production availability, right? Supply was related to food accessibility. So for example, in single cropping zones in high altitude mountain areas, around 3000 meter above sea level, mostly crops are grown in April. If snow melts late, it melts completely from agricultural field in May. Cultivation delays. That delay in cultivation affects the choice of crops and productivity of crops. Then climate hazards. It means climate change and climate change induced hazards are under stability and sustainability also. One key difference in stability and sustainability is the time period. Stability is for short run, short period of time. If food supplies or food production or food utilizations are affected, we can say stability of food in that area is affected. If in the long run, over the decades, food supplies, food production or utilization in mountain areas is affected, we can say that sustainability of food systems in mountain areas is affected. Sometimes climate induced events are instant. For example, flood, and after flood, things start coming to normal life. It means that flood affected the stability of food in mountain areas. But sometimes if dry habitat, population is going to other areas, means out migration, right? Natural resources are degrading. It means it may have long-term impacts on food production, accessibility, and utilization in that area. So that will come under sustainability. So I was talking about climatic hazards that surely very severe in mountain areas. Frequency is also high, especially in Hindu Kush Himalayan. In last 5-6 years, we are observing high frequency and severity of climate-induced hazards. So it's a kind of two extremes. Some areas are facing droughts, very persistent long droughts like Afghanistan and western parts of Pakistan. And some areas like in central Himalayas, Nepal or northeast of India, we can observe frequent floods. Then other natural hazards, of course, earthquake is important among other natural hazards. Then biotic stresses, pest attacks, it can be independent or can be because of climate change. Evidences suggest differently. In some areas of Hindu Kush Himalayan region, some evidences suggest that climate change or changes in temperature is also resulting in an increased incidence of pest attacks. Then global or national fuel prices and crises, global or national price fluctuations. Then political factors, especially conflicts on the use of natural resources, pastures, water, or civil wars, conflicts also affect food stability. Then food safety related issues that may also affect food stability. Then pandemic. Pandemic can affect food stability in the short run, and in the long run, if it affects, then we can say that it's affecting the sustainability of food systems. This COVID-19, it was not expected that it will go that long. It affected food stability. Now it's affecting food sustainability also in mountain areas. That's why it's put under sustainability dimension. In sustainability, we can see almost all aspects in sustainability are very much relevant to mountain areas. Mountain specificities, as mentioned in stability, climate and related hazards, other natural hazards, agrobiodiversity loss. It may not impact food in the short term. In the long run, food systems may be more non-sustainable if agrobiodiversity loss continue. Then changing dietary habits. Dietary habits may not change in 1 or 2 years. Dietary habit change are over the years, long-term change, and it affects the food preferences. If food preferences are affected, of course, it will have impact on choice of crops and number of crops. Ultimate impact on agrobiodiversity. Then degradation of natural resources, unsustainable practices like use of chemicals and all that. Then declining interest of youth in agriculture and mountain areas. It's very prominent and very serious issue in Hindu Kush Himalayan region. Mainly economically active youth prefer to out-migrate to other areas for to meet aspirations of their life, to meet their socio-economic goals. And more workload is on women, especially women more than 40 years. Of course, girl, youth, young women also prefer to out-migrate. At the moment, we don't know what will be the scenario in future. But at the moment, more workload on women, especially more than 40 years. Then population change means out migration, demographic dynamics are changing, unplanned policies. Some of the governments, I will not name the governments, some of the governments, they announce subsidies for food in mountain areas, but that food is not the feature of mountain areas. Food coming from plain areas, major cereals, wheat, rice, or pulses. So because of those subsidies, local food cultivation and agriculture diversity impacted, and now inducing long-term impacts on food systems in mountain areas. Of course, pandemic, as I mentioned. Then agencies mostly related to socio-economic thing, gender and social inclusion, income and wealth disparities, fragmentation. As I mentioned, mostly land holdings in mountain areas are very small, and uneven trade aspects. One thing I'm very confident about, mountain areas cannot compete plain areas in terms of trade aspects. For example, comparative advantage of trade they may not have in so many commodities. They can have advantage in competitiveness. Competitive advantage mean if some character very unique in product, and that character can give advantage to some area over the similar type of commodities from other areas, that we call competitive advantage. One example is organic farming. In mountains, organic farming may have competitive advantage. Even prices are high, opportunity cost is high if we talk about comparative advantage. But because of that organic feature, mountain products may have competitive advantage. Then uneven supply of technology. Of course, in mountain areas of Hindu Kush Himalayan region, technology supply is inadequate. So now we are clear why mountain, nature of mountain food security and context of mountain is different from plain areas. We cannot treat mountain areas food security similar to plain areas or at national level. We cannot put everything in one basket. So another approach of food security assessment is food systems approach. I just put couple of more slides on food security assessment because it's training. So giving some exposure is very important. So in food systems approach, we track the life cycle of products. For example, starting from production to consumption. What track it follows? From production, it travels to processors, people who are doing packaging, then distribution, retailing, and ultimately going to consumers. Whatever pathway, it food systems approach or multi-dimensional approach. In planning, we have to consider the dimensional approach. So that's why multi-dimensional approach is very important in food and nutrition security planning. Another approach, very rare approach and very less used. So recently I have been trying to use this approach for food security assessment. That is capability approach. Amatyas, and maybe you are aware if you, there are few economists among you. There are four elements of this approach, capability approach: resources, capability, functionings, and utility. When we put food security indicators according to the elements of capability approach, so we can see it's not that much different from multi-dimensional approach. Only the pathway is different. We can see resources in the multi-dimensional approach. Also in production of food or food availability dimension, we discuss resources because resources are important to grow food. Then capability, in capability, two things are very important to understand. One is ability of people or systems to do something, to grow crop, to improve their dietary diversity, to improve income and opportunities, and freedom of people to opt between opportunity, different choices. Then functionality, functionings means what ultimate outcomes we want. For example, improved and diverse food production, better food choices, better income, improved awareness on food and health, whatever. The main question, whatever approach we choose, that multidimensional approach, food availability, accessibility, utilization, other three dimensions are very important. See, they are also reflecting here in functionality. See, functionings, food availability, this indicator is related to food access, and next indicator is available to food access again, then improved awareness of food and health, it's related to food utilization. So in multi-dimensional approach, we have one advantage, as I mentioned. If we plan food security following that multi-dimensional approach, it's easy to contribute to other development objectives. Let's see. Now I would like to present one example of climate change, how climate change is impacting food security. Remember, climate change is a factor, a broader factor, because climate change is a process, I am just assuming as a broader factor, which also features in food stability and food sustainability. Let's see, we are taking only one aspect. We can imagine how complex is food security. So out of that, we are only considering climate change, and we will see how it's affecting food security. So we can see it's based on several studies ICIMOD conducted in Hindu Kush Himalayan, place-based studies, survey-based studies, or ethnographic studies. So these are narrative statements. One thing is very important to remember, in mountain areas, it's very difficult to generalize things. Whatever I am presenting here, it's narrative statement, means based on most of the evidences. There might be counter evidences from other areas because in Eastern Himalayas, altogether very different mountain ecosystem, humid, more rainfall, more covered by forest, diverse food systems, production system. In Western Himalayas like Pakistan or Afghanistan, 70 to 90% dependence on melt water. meltwater coming from glaciers. So mountains are mainly dry, food systems are less diverse. So we can imagine how much diverse variation we may face traveling from east to western part. Similarly, from altitude to lower altitudes also. So climate change indicators, multi-tier, for example, changes in temperature, precipitation and all that. And second tier of indicators like incidence of climate-induced hazards. They're impacting several indicators of food security. We can see these indicators do not belong to one dimension. When we will see, we can think that what I showed in that slide, these indicators belong to several dimensions. Reduce productivity of key crops. It's very prominent because of climate change induced changes or hazards. Then reduced agriculture income. Dependence on external food is increasing because local production in mountain areas is declining. Now dependence on external food moving from plain areas to mountain areas is increasing. Then reduce production diversity, of course, then ultimately reduce food variety and dietary diversity. Increased health issues because of climate induced hazards, plus because uh, declining diet. That decline actually efficiencies, then
Excuse me, Abid, we have difficulties in hearing you
some of
clearly.
so you are not listening clearly, or you are uh, hello, 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 hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you, but
Hello.
we had the difficulties for the last, let's say, 2 or 3 sentences.
I'm sorry for I'm sorry for of security or climate change is impacting food security. We can see it's impacting productivity of main crops. Then dependence on external food is increasing. Then livestock and agriculture used to be the major source of income and livelihoods in mountain areas. But in last couple of decades, still agriculture and livestock, they are contributing to livelihoods and income of mountain people, but they are no more main income sources. We can see in brackets here very less or small percentage of household they reported in all four river basins we studied through a large scale survey. That very small proportion of household reported that agriculture and livestock are still main source of their income. It means the importance or contribution of agriculture and livestock to household income is declining over time. People or farmers, they are taking different adaptation measures, and one is very prominent. They are being indebted, see, buying food on credit, right? And taking credit in kind or in money from their relatives, their friends, or shopkeepers is very prominent. And the food quality is also being affected. See, 21% household in upper Indus in Pakistan, they said whenever there is shock or climatic shock, so we switch from diverse food to less expensive food. Then sometime adults also have to skip 1 or 2 times food to serve elderly member or children of their families. So another one factor I have taken from agency, women, agency dimension, as I showed in one of the slides. because of climate change or independent of climate change, out migration is happening in mountain areas. That out migration is very rampant, and it's leading to more workload on women, and especially in the case of hazards, for example, flood or avalanche or flood. If male members are already out migrated to other areas, it becomes very difficult for women to take care of their family members, to feed their family members, to evacuate to safe places. So very challenging for women, and especially households who are taken care mainly by women because of out migration of male members to other areas. They face a lot of difficulty. They go into transitory food insecurity for weeks. And if women are pregnant and kids are small, then it's really difficult. It may have severe health impacts on children or women in that area. So there are some areas, as I mentioned in one of my slides, that mountains may not have comparative advantage in so many things. Only few things they may have comparative advantage, but they may have competitive advantage in terms of characters. For example, some crops are very specific, niche crops, very specific, context specific crops to mountain. For example, buckwheat, barley, millets, and several other foods, local beans which cannot be grown in plain areas. And branding and value addition of those products may give mountain areas competitive advantage. Then fruit, nuts, vegetables, and some cash crops like tea are also very important, may give mountain areas competitive advantage. Then fish, livestock, medicinal plants, beekeeping are also very important. All niche type of products, organic farming. Then use of melt water. Melt water is not available in plain areas. Melt water is very good for productivity, and in abundance it's available in mountain areas, especially in western Himalayas. Tapping that potential is very important to diversify agriculture. Then use of remittances in value addition of mountain specific products may also contribute significantly. Then integrating non-farm sector is also very important. For example, one of the most important things is tourism. Then embroidery, wood carvings, handicrafts. These are also very important to be integrated with agriculture. As I mentioned, contribution of agriculture and livestock is declining over time. Contribution to income and livelihoods declining over time. And the importance of non-agriculture sources is increasing. Contribution to livelihoods doesn't mean the contribution to food consumption is also declining. The importance of local production remains very high in mountain areas, but contribution to income or livelihoods is declining. So integration of both farm and non-farm sectors are very important for sustainable food security in mountain areas. What is the most important for policies? First, policymakers, researchers, or academicians, they really need to understand the mountain context. As I presented in one of slides, mountain context is very different. Nature of food security is very different. We cannot put everything in one bag. Then mainstreaming mountain perspective adequately in policies is important. In our region, one thing I always disagree and debate on that. Mountain products, mountain crops are treated as minor crops in academic courses. If students are taught that mountain crops are minor crops, so the will go or grow, they go up to the policy or decision making positions, and they still consider mountain crops or products are minor. Now, more focus is given on major crops which are coming from plain areas, maize, rice, wheat, sugarcane, all subsidies, sports are around those crops. Then mountain specific data on food security is also important, because in mountain areas, around 40 years we have been working in Hindu Kush Himalayan. Still we don't have data, adequate data from several distant mountain regions of Hindu Kush Himalayan. Data and frequent data is very important, because data science is dynamic. We cannot rely on one time period data. Then tapping competitive advantage of mountain. As I mentioned, all about mountain areas is to tap the competitive advantage. It's very difficult because of high transportation costs, remoteness, and several other factors, as I mentioned, high vulnerability. So it's difficult for mountain areas to have comparative advantage. It's competitive advantage which mountain can focus on. Thank you very much. Now I would like to welcome questions, specific questions if you have.
Okay, thank you, Abid. Thank you very much for this first part of your presentation. And okay, now it's time for breaking the ice and start questioning or comment.
So one thing I would like to highlight that in next session I will exclusively present on the impacts of COVID on food security, mountain food security.
Okay.
So that session, that lecture will exclusively cover that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for pointing out. So please, don't be shy. Maybe you are tired of an entire week of a promo course, but
yes. Can I ask a question?
Please.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I am specially interested in the effect of climate change on mountain women. And I completely agree with you that the out migration of young population has actually increased the workload of mountain women to a very high degree. Now, I have also observed that the mountain women, they are working for the agriculture. There means at least 80% of the agricultural work are done by the women now in the mountain region. And also they have the additional responsibilities of fuel load, fodder collection, and the household responsibilities, which they manage alone without the male member of the family. So I would actually ask you, given that you have worked in the entire Hindu Kush region, is there any specific data on the increased on the effect of actually the climate change on the mountain women, especially with respect to their increased participation in the agricultural work in mountain areas? Thank you.
May I respond, or we have to take questions, then I can respond at one time?
Oh, you can answer, please.
Okay. Thank you very much for very important question. So two pathways are mainly followed in decision making, and those pathways are also followed by us. One pathway having very representative data based on representative surveys in mountain areas. Based on that, provide policy input. Another thing, to collect several evidences, several case studies from different parts of the region, and based on those evidences, construct or establish narrative statements. Overall message. So as far as data availability is concerned, we don't have representative data on out migration or workload on women because of out migration, whether migration is climate induced or triggered by socioeconomic aspiration. But we have collected several evidences right from Eastern Himalaya to Western Himalayas. So based on those evidences, we provide policy inputs. If you are interested in evidences, we can provide evidence, several publications, small scale surveys. So we have evidences, not the representative data.
Yes, that will be very helpful. Thank you for your answering. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have time for other questions. Please, Piyush.
Hi, Abid. This is Piyush. I want to know, while I don't come from a food security or food background, I found this very fascinating, the kind of nuances and the complexities. Do you have an example where you've actually been able to intervene and address some of these issues, and what the learnings in that exercise were? Thanks.
here we have evidences and we have some solutions also. So here also different pathways. If some government programs or initiatives are already working on some specific areas of food security, as I presented, food security is very complex. We cannot at once address so many issues or determinants or indicators under each determinant or dimension. So, for example, addressing income or value chain development. So that will address only the food accessibility part. So we are following different pathways. We have tried 2-3 times climate smart agriculture piloting in Pakistan and mountain resilient agriculture or villages in Nepal. We have tried to address several aspects of food security in a package of solutions. So somehow, someway, we are successful to contribute to food security and resilience of food system. But it's very difficult to address each and everything. This is one of the main reason why addressing food security is very difficult because it's very complex, especially for governments even for food security in mountain areas, it's very difficult to address. So they have different packages, different programs or initiatives or flagship programs, but they may target only few things. But what governments can do if physical vulnerability is there because of mountain specificity? We cannot control climate induced hazard. We cannot control seismology and other things. So still, I would like to give you one example from Sindhupal Chowk district of Nepal. So agriculture was very prominent, a big contributor to food security and food consumption and income of local people, especially farming community. But after 2015 earthquake, now frequency of landslides and debris flow has increased in that area. Now communities and farmers, they do not face safe to even live in those areas, let alone continuing farming in those areas. So several things are uncontrollable which add to physical vulnerability of mountain areas. We tried through piloting holistic approaches and somehow we are successful. We cannot say we are 100% successful. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question.
Please go ahead.
Oh yes, I'm Godfrey from Uganda. I'm based in Kampala. So my question, first of all, thank you for the presentation. And my question on food security. I want to say that yes, again here we have many women in mountain areas involved in farming and in agriculture. And maybe the question I want to put to you is on the community knowledge in trying to become resilient. I've seen in situations where these farmers in these mountain communities, they come up with their own local knowledge and initiatives on trying to adapt to climate change. For instance, I've seen some with local knowledge of irrigation. In your experience, how do you find the community knowledge in trying to adapt climate change to do farming such that they can produce and have high yields from agriculture and then meet the issue of food security? And maybe also you would highlight on how maybe governments or other partners can support such knowledge, because to me, I think it is really, really important to support such knowledge. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Very important. I really agree. Traditional or indigenous knowledge is very important. So maybe you remember I put first point why in which areas mountain can perform better, that is traditional crops. So traditional agriculture and traditional crops are very much driven by traditional knowledge because the older generation of farmers, they know the cultivation of traditional crops and recipes, how to prepare traditional diets or dishes. That is very important to maintain the dietary diversity. If I come to the production side, overall production at landscape level in mountain areas. For example, in Western Himalaya, Afghanistan, larger parts of northern Pakistan and two states in India. One is Himachal Pradesh, and another is I forgot the name of that state. We had one disaster also in the recent past, that avalanche triggered disaster. So there are traditional irrigation systems. We call those irrigation system as KUHL, KUHL, KUHL. Those traditional irrigation systems are maintained through indigenous knowledge. Yes, Uttarakhand. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So those irrigation systems are maintained or managed are by traditional knowledge and traditional practice, traditional governance system are performing really well, especially in western parts of Himalayas in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Indian states, thousands of such irrigation systems are abundant, having huge impact on adaptation of agriculture to climate change. So, in short, traditional knowledge is very important. In Western parts, traditional knowledge is maintained and kept, and those cool system, traditional irrigation system fed by glaciers, are still working and significantly contributing to agriculture. You can imagine 90% agriculture in Gilgit-Baltistan administrative area of Pakistan is dependent on those traditional irrigation systems. In Uttarakhand and Himachal in India, though such irrigation systems are abundant, are having huge impact on diversity of production in those two states. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. There is a question from the chat, but Ghulam Mohammad, if you want, please, could you please open your microphone and ask directly to our lecturer?
Yes, sir. I have a question. I have a question that in our area in Sikardu, so there we constructed a dam like in 2020. So before we don't have any flood and disaster in the area. So after construction of dam, so there is two heavy floods. So it affected the area and terrain. So what do you say about this? This is my question.
Yes, yes. If you remember in the cross-cutting dimension of sustainability and stability, I put one point unplanned policies. That also cover the development. If we conduct any of unplanned activities, especially construction of roads, that may trigger landslides also, especially in that area, very calcareous, dry mountain, and sometimes we may face the mountain deserts in Baltistan area also. Unplanned construction, even our dams or roads or bridges, they may trigger hazards. They may contribute to triggering a frequency of hazards. That's why planning is very important. For planning, assessments and data feasibilities, reliable feasibility reports are very important. We cannot touch mountain ecosystems without planning. This is very important. I agree with you.
Okay, thank you very much to all the participants who submitted the questions. Now, if it's okay for you, we can have a 5-minute break, so we can start in 5 minutes for the next part of the day. Okay, so see you in 5 minutes. Okay, so please. We cannot hear you.
Can you now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, I'm very new to this app, so that's why sometimes I face difficulty. It's okay, I'm trying to manage. So, in this lecture, I would like to cover the COVID-19 and food security linkages in Hindu Kush Himalayas. Mainly, I will focus on the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic on food security in the region and the recovery process. What steps are required to recover from this? Because still pandemic is going on, we cannot say it's COVID is over. Now, post-COVID recovery process has started. But in future, because still governments are trying to cope with this pandemic situation, health systems are under pressure. So there are some steps. So in this presentation, I have suggested based on our ICIMOD's policy paper, which we did in 2020. So all data and statements in these presentations are based on that policy paper. It means data is from 2020. It's not updated with 2021. So there is one question. So let's start. So COVID-19 had some macro impacts. So let's see key macroeconomic impacts. So first impact is rapid decline in GDP growth rate in the Hindu Kush Himalayan countries. I'm not putting figures because projections by ICIMOD, projections by international organizations like World Bank and IMF, and the actual figures reported by governments are a little bit different. So I'm not putting figures. So based on that, one message can be drawn that GDP in all countries affected, and some of the projections and the actual figures are very much different. For example, in Pakistan, projections were negative in 2020 and were projected to be very close to 1, and but actually it's very close to 4%. So similarly in India, so that's why I have not put figures here. But whatever its projection or actual figures are close or very much different, overall pandemic had negative impact on GDP growth rate in all member countries in our region. Then significant decline of food and non-food trade because governments they prioritize the trade of uh, commodity which are really important essential items. Governments they continue trading, and some non-essential items government stopped trading during pandemic situation, particularly during the peak periods. That impacted the food supply chains in plain areas and largely in mountain areas. Then changes in inflation rate varied from one country to other country. So very surprisingly, India maintained their inflation rate. So it did not increase that much. But China also they maintained, but other countries' inflation rate was very high. During pandemic period, it's still going on, but at the moment, somehow, some way, the process is going back to normal. Smart lockdowns or specific lockdown, geographic, geographic specific, location specific lockdowns are being done. So somehow, somewhere, life is trying to get back to normal. So another thing, diversion of attention funds to health sector. Of course, in our region, most of the countries are developing, at least 12 countries. So allocation of funds and redistribution of funds to health sector, this is understandable, and because health systems are facing pressure because of this diversion, also other things like food security, agriculture, and steps related to industry and infrastructure, they are affected. Then high impact on informal sector. This is the most affected sector. Informal sector means the vendors, small shopkeepers, which are not documented in economy, but they are part of economy. They're working in economy, but normally small shopkeepers and these type small workers in a workforce face layoffs. Layoffs mean partial or full loss of employment. For example, in Pakistan, by July 2020, around 12 million workers they face layoffs. And we can imagine mostly mountain people, they out migrate to other countries or they migrate to other areas, downstream areas for work. So specific figure we don't have, but it's speculated that people mostly who face layoffs are largely from mountain areas or isolated desert areas. And similarly, lockdown disrupted tourism sector in Bhutan and Nepal. and affected employment of around 50,000 people in Bhutan. We can imagine Bhutan is around 500,000 population country, and 50,000 people's employment was affected partially or fully. In Nepal, in tourism industry, around 100,000 people were affected. In India, in 2020, this figure is up to July or August. So 40 to 50 million workers, they faced layoffs, partial or full loss of jobs. Now COVID-19 impacts on mountain food security. Let's enter into specific title of our presentation. In mountain areas of our region, depending on the country and within country, depending on the region, it's based on several evidences. So 30 to 60% of food demand in mountain areas is met by supplies from plain areas. So as I mentioned, it's very difficult for mountain areas also to be self-sufficient in food because land holdings are small, topographies are difficult. Mountain agriculture can be diverse but cannot reach the scale which is required to fulfill the local demand. That's why almost how we can say roughly almost half at region level food demand is met by food coming from plain areas, but it varies from one area to other area 60 to 30 to 60% range, but we have come up based on different evidences. At national level, governments they try to maintain their food buffers, food reserves, but the supplies to mountain areas were disrupted because of lockdown, because of fear. The people, transporters, they were not able to operate from plain areas to mountain areas. So that's disrupted the supplies, food supplies from urban centers or food reserve centers to mountain areas. Even within mountain areas, transportation of food from one area to other area, for example, from rural areas to mountain urban centers was also disrupted. That also caused physical inaccessibility of food in markets or for people, and it also resulted in high prices of food and affected food purchasing power of the people. Then harvesting of winter crops, for example, wheat and barley in double cropping zones. I'm sure you are aware of single, double, and transitional cropping zones in our region. Single cropping zones are really at high altitude, around 3000 meter, where only one cropping season is available from April to mid-August or sometime the first week of September. And it's difficult to grow second crop because of heavy snowfall and harsh weather. And in transitional cropping zones, little bit lower altitude, around 2000, 2700 or 500, depends on country's own definition. So sometimes they have time period to grow second crop. If snow melts earlier, then they can cultivate one crop earlier and second crop right after the harvest. Mostly vegetables are grown in those zones. In double cropping zones are in valleys where multiple crops are at least double crop they can cultivate without any impacts from weather or seasonality. So in double cropping zones, harvesting of wheat and barley was delayed. It resulted in lower productivity. And another thing, return of out migrants, because several out migrants who were working in the same countries, downstream areas or other countries, they returned because of layoffs, and it added additional pressure on local food systems. And one positive point, when out migrants they returned from Nepal and Pakistan, and some parts of Bhutan also, we have evidences that they indulged in agriculture. In some cases, they started cultivating the land which was abundant before. So I have put in bracket only a few evidences. Confidence level is low, but we have some evidences on that. Then supply of inputs to mountain areas was also disrupted for at least 3 to 4 months from April to July 2020. So because of that disruption also, farmers in several areas had to cultivate crops with local inputs or without adequate supply of adequate amount of inputs. So in terms of food accessibility, mountains, both physical and economic access was disrupted by lockdowns. So panic buying, not only in mountain areas, in plains or advanced countries also, and maybe we can observe that. Any shock or such pandemic, people try to buy everything and store at home. That panic buying was very prominent in mountain areas also. Because of panic buying, it depleted the food stocks in mountain areas, and mostly poor people. In panic buying, it also happens that higher prices are charged because risk is there, pandemic fear is there, so people are willing to buy on higher prices. So it impacted a low income segment in mountain areas, and they were not able to buy adequate amount of food. And then in 30 to 50% household, depending on country and region within country, depend on tourism, small businesses, and daily work. As I mentioned in my previous slides, that layoffs, they resulted in low income of households and of course low food purchasing power. It impacted the household who are dependent on tourism and other small businesses. We can imagine 30 to 50% households in mountain areas are dependent on these income sources. And migrant workers temporarily or permanently lost their jobs and return of these workers affected the income of 50 to 20% household. We have evidences from Nepal and Pakistan only on this. So because out migrants, they returned, and remittance amount declined or remittance amount halted, that impacted the income and food security or overall livelihoods of 15 to 20% households in mountain areas in our region. All above issues actually contributed to declining purchasing power, food purchasing power. Not only for food, if we see the utilization dimension, it also impacted the access to health facilities. Frequent lockdowns caused a decline in dietary diversity because it's very natural, it's beyond the control of people, and sometimes for governments also it's very difficult to maintain the diversity whenever some hazard, pandemic or emergency situation. It's always advised in quick response or rapid response to provide very essential food aid to those areas which are hit by that risk or hazard. So governments, they tried best to provide essential food items including cereals or pulses. So it means that diversity in supply that was affected. So we cannot blame government, we cannot blame the local people that they stored illegally and all that, because this is natural thing. In response, we have to provide only essential items first. Then huge pressure on health systems. Whenever there was huge pressure on health systems, there were spillover impacts also. Spillover impacts, for example, some hospitals are full of COVID patients and they are paying attention to COVID patients. Fear in public prevails that they are not willing to go outside and to get check up their self in hospitals because they are afraid that if you go to hospitals, then we may catch COVID. Because of this fear, mortality rate, overall mortality rate in our region increased. That may be because of spillover effect of COVID-19. People were not ready to go to hospitals for checkup. Our hospitals did not pay attention to those diseases or health conditions which can be managed later parts, that are not emergency cases, something like that. Or that mortality rate may be attributed to unreported cases of COVID. So that is not clear, that is blurred. That's why I'm not putting on slide. Then COVID-19 not only impacted, as I presented, three dimensions of food security. So because it falls under the dimension of stability and falls under the dimension of sustainability also, because it's inducing long-term impacts. So within these two dimensions, stability and sustainability, it interacted with other factors. As how it interacted, see, delays in crop sowing and harvesting and input supplies. If input supplies are delayed, seed supply is delayed, crop harvesting or previous crop harvesting is delayed, and of course, sowing of other crop will also be delayed. So then it will have larger negative impact on productivity. For example, if pandemic induced lockdown resulted in delayed supply of seed and inputs to plain areas. Season of crop cultivation is April or May. If inputs are supplied in the end of May, so of course it will impact the productivity of income because of late sowing. Another thing, restricted movements or transhuman pastoralists is very important and unattended point. In several areas of Hindu Kush Himalayan, especially in western parts of Suleiman ranges in Pakistan, parts of Karakoram ranges, and parts of Afghanistan, during the lockdown are what we call social stigma. So people thought that these pastoralists, they may carry virus from one area to other area. So their movements were restricted socially. They were also afraid that if we move from one area to other area, we may face some social stigma. So it impacted income and food security of pastoral communities in mountain areas. Then supply chain was further affected by onset of monsoon season in 2020 when pandemic impacts started on agriculture and food security. After mid of July and August, monsoon period started, and landslides and debris flow and risks of floods and all that. It actually result in cascading impact because people were already facing restricted food supplies or disrupted food supplies in mountain areas, then monsoon added to their worries. Then trade of prioritized commodities leading to decline in diversity of products in distant mountain areas. It's already explained in one of other slide. So because government, they had to prioritize which commodities we have to trade and which commodities are really essential to trade. So it impacted not only the diversity at national level in countries, but also the diversities and food supplies to mountain areas. Then response and recovery process. Governments, they responded well in our region. Of course, there are constraints. Some governments may not have that much resources, but governments within their resources, they try to respond well. Three type of responses we observed from governments. One, health emergency response, because health is also part of the indicators. If you remember my previous lecture that I put health facilities and infrastructure or health carrying capacity under food utilization. So health was announced countries and in different time periods they paid full attention to COVID patient. It also had spillover impact on patients of Pakistan, and the mortality rate rose as I presented in my previous slide that mortality rate is cannot be attributed confidently whether it's because of unreported cases of COVID-19 or it's because of spillover impact of other disease, for example, cardiac issues, blood pressure, diabetes, and all that. People were not willing because of scare. They were not willing to go to hospitals. So it impacted and resulted in death. So then food aid, governments try to provide food aid and financial support also. So few of the examples I have put in India, the government planned around 23 billions they allocated to provide essential food items, health facilities, fuel and direct cash to support the poor people and senior citizens. In Pakistan, government allocated and implemented 1 billion for direct cash transfer to most vulnerable families. Then Bangladesh also, they supported their workers through salary stimulus. And in Nepal, Myanmar, China also governments, they supported somehow, some in kind or some programs or financial aid. So response is more rapid in short term whenever there is some emergency situation or shock or hazards. When governments or humanitarian missions, they respond to support the people. They want to help the people immediately. That comes under response. And recovery is little bit long term. We can categorize recovery into short term steps or long term steps. So in short, still pandemic is going on. So still governments are struggling and still governments are trying to strengthen their health systems and cope with this pandemic situation. Simultaneously, governments are also emphasizing and trying to get the things to normal life. So we have observed the recovery process has not started to that extent this which should have been there. For recovery in short term, some steps are very important. For example, in mountain areas, because of this lockdown disruption, one thing is very important to understand mountain context in food security, high dependence on external food. If lockdown, if some hazard, even vehicles are disrupted because of landslide, flood, gulf, or lockdown. So it may push thousand mountain people into transitory food security. That's why locally in mountain areas, it's very important to maintain food reserves. We mostly call technically buffer reserve. So for that, local storage facilities are important to be improved in mountain areas, and those storage facilities can be linked with national food procurement system in countries and provide subsidies to poor people for food items and inputs, because people are still trying to recover in mountain areas from the losses caused by pandemic. So in future, it's difficult for mountain, especially farming communities, to fully recover within months. It may take years. So for that purpose, to support people in recovery process, important to give them financial incentives in the form of subsidies. Then promote collection centers set up by smallholders, even at smallholders level, for a group level, collection centers are important. If collection centers are established, of course, product diversification can be done, and those collection centers may also contribute to local storage, local reserves in mountain areas. Then in medium and long term, as I mentioned here, that competitiveness of mountain areas is kept in mind while suggesting these steps. Develop specific programs on revival of mountain specific crops, traditional crops and native livestock. It's very important because mountains have advantage. These crops cannot be grown in plain areas. Even if can be grown, quality may not be that good as it is in mountain areas. So mountain areas may have competitive advantage. So important to focus on revival of these crops. In last 2 decades, it has been observed traditional crops in mountain areas are disappearing or underutilized. Farmers, to compensate the climate-induced losses, they try to cultivate high-yielding varieties or popular crops like cereal, wheat, or maize, potato. They are actually neglecting their own gene pool, traditional food crops. Then include these traditional crops in national procurement system. At present, national procurement systems in our region are mainly emphasizing on mainstream crops, popular crops, wheat, maize, rice, and pulses. So traditional crops have to be the part of a national procurement system. Then investment, research and development of for technology advancement on cultivation, post-harvest loss, technologies, value addition, marketing of mountain niche products. Marketing of mountain niche products, that's very important. And all value addition, post-harvest technologies or cultivation or production related technologies have to revolve around that. I have observed in several mountain areas, farmers are growing wheat varieties which are more adaptive or suitable for plain areas. So this type of maladaptations are actually causing a lot of losses to agrobiodiversity in mountain areas, and mountains are losing their competitive advantage. So that's why all value additions, marketing strategy should revolve around mountain niche products. And providing incentive to youth is very important. As I mentioned, youth are preferring to out migrate to other areas, even if not related to agriculture or farm economy. Even related to non-farm economy, youth involvement is very important in mountain areas. And farm and non-farm sectors may be integrated. And investment in ICT use and technology is also very important in mountain. At the moment, ICT use is very marginal in most of the areas. In China, it's exception. They're much advanced. They are using the good land use planning with thank you, as I promise that I will show the cool traditional irrigation system, glacier fed irrigation system. We can see this is glacier, and from glaciers they are preparing water channel, and this water channel goes to agriculture field. This is from Hunza, part of Pakistan. So we can see directly water from glaciers is going to agriculture fields. And different studies assess differently 70 to 90% agriculture in Gilgit-Baltistan and Chitral area of Pakistan is dependent on glacier fed irrigation systems. We can imagine the importance of glaciers for agriculture in Western Himalaya. India, Himachal and Uttarakhand also, traditionally agriculture used to be dependent on these systems, cool systems. So thousands of cool systems are abundant in these two Indian states, actually impacting agriculture diversity in those areas. So now we have session for questions. So you can ask any of the specific questions or you want clarity, I will be very happy to provide clarifications.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Please.
I have a question. Sorry. I have a question that you are showing this Hunza example. So do you know about recently glove outburst in Pasu that glove affected their agriculture a lot? So it means glove is affecting agriculture. What do you think about this?
Yes, no second thought. As I explained in my previous lecture, the climate-induced hazards, gloves incidents are mainly attributed to climate change. They are impacting not only the stability and overall long-term sustainability of mountain agriculture systems also. So incidents of gloves are increasing, of course, in Western Himalaya Karakoram ranges, in Skardu, not only in Skardu, in Himalayan ranges also. They are impacting agriculture systems in the long run. Overall sustainability of agriculture is impacted. Even in Chitral also in 2016 or 17 such events happened. Heavy rainfall triggered glove actually. So those were also one of the key events, most critical events impacted agriculture in Chitral. In future also such events will remain threat, major risk to agriculture systems in Gilgit-Baltistan and Chitral. So that is reality. The only thing how we plan agriculture and how we develop early warning systems. You are much aware, maybe more aware than me. People's local knowledge, I learned from Chitral that the people also have local knowledge, early warning, that they can guess from sound from glaciers that maybe in coming days it may burst. Early warning systems integrated with advanced and local knowledge can contribute significantly to reduce the risk. Risks not in terms of land erosion or erosion of crops, adaptation to reduce the risk. For example, shifting to those crops which are less vulnerable to such events, or integrating livestock which can be moved. So another reality in the case of Gulf, very less respond and evacuation time also. But at least integration of livestock in food systems will somehow reduce the risks. But this risk will prevail and will remain major threat to agriculture systems, especially in Western Himalayas. Please, any question if you want to share example from other mountain ranges, so we can discuss that one also because the lectures I presented are focused on Hindu Kush Himalayan region. If you have a different type of contrasting examples or evidences from other regions, you can share, please. At least share something or ask question. Let's make best use of this time.
Hi, this is Rosa Laura. I know I shouldn't be asking questions, but I cannot resist. So I will ask something. You mentioned in your presentation that in addition to the pressure on mountain people, because their economy is usually based on agriculture, on remittances and on tourism, there was also pressure because many people that had out migrated had to come back because they couldn't work anymore outside their village or abroad. How do you think this is going to impact in the long run the mountain livelihood? Do you think these people, as soon as the economic condition will improve, will out-migrate again? Or do you think they will try to stay in the villages and support their livelihood there? Do you have any projection about this? Because I think this is going to be quite interesting because these are people that have acquired some skills living outside their villages. So perhaps that could be also a driver for local development, while of course they are putting additional pressure on the natural resources and on the already scarce food availability. So thank you for this. And thank you, of course, for the lecture from my side.
Thank you so much, Rosa Laura. It's very important question. So there are two sides of this answer what I'm going to give. One is, of course, at the moment, mountain systems overall, mountain livelihoods and economy are feeling pressure because of return of out migrant, not only because of decline in remittances, but also additional population pressure and high demand for food in mountain areas. But there is one positive, they have brought skills back. So ICIMOD's focus is also on that, and we are especially trying to convey this policy message to governments. In our policy paper, we highlighted very prominently and we presented to representative of governments also. Let's not take it a disadvantage or pressure. Let's take it a positive aspect that these migrants, returning migrants, their skills can be used in entrepreneurship, value addition, ICT, and they can contribute to mountain economy. But for that, of course, financial incentives are required from government. So those incentives and mechanisms to incentivize such things, for example, adequate access to credit, adequate access to extension services, or adequate access to information, that is also important. It's little bit complex, but both positive and negative ways. But some anomalies also we have observed, very strange. in Pakistan, thousands of people they returned to mountain areas. If we see overall country, thousands of people they face layoff, they returned. But since October 2020, now in 2021, remittance sent by out migrants are increasing in Pakistan. We are trying to explore why remittances, because we were expecting that out migrants they returned, and there was supposed to be decline in remittance sent by out migrants, but remittances are increasing. We thought that maybe because of before exit from their destination country they sent back whatever saving they had, but still remittances are growing. The similar trend, but that not that significant, we have observed in Nepal also. So more investigation is required. So if out migrants they have returned, of course they have returned, they have started cultivating uncultivated land which was abundant because of their out migration. It was difficult for women to cultivate land. They came back, they started cultivating land, they contribute to agriculture activities, sowing, harvesting, everything. The same time, remittances are also growing in countries. So more investigation is required, and we are doing trying to do assessments. Thank you.
I think I have another question. Can I ask? Oh, yes.
Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you once again. And I'm happy about, again, the elaboration you gave on the example of glaciers using the water from the mountains to do irrigation. And my question is, I'll just give an example of what happens in a mountain here in Uganda called Rwenzori. Sometimes there's flooding because of the global warming and climate change. At times there is loss of glacier and water at times pours and the floods sweep away the crops and what. So I'm interested in understanding if you may throw more light on how those people do such kind of irrigation, or do they also maybe experience such challenges like floods affecting their crops as they're trying even to get water from the glaciers? If you'd throw more light on how it is done there, I think, yeah, it would be important.
Thank you very much. Another important question. So one of the participant is from Baltistan area. He may have also observed that. So several times it happened that some incident happened. For example, hazard, glove happened, or because of governance issues or management issues, such irrigation systems dried. Not only because of flooding or natural hazards or climate-induced things. Several sites we have observed that hundreds of such irrigation systems that dried. It impacted agricultural land. Around 900 irrigation systems, such irrigation systems I know only in Pakistan, which dried partially or fully dried. Not only because of climate-induced hazards, because of natural process also. In western parts of Himalaya and especially Karakoram range, there is natural phenomena after every 4 or 5 decades. Glaciers they slip down gradually. It's very gradual process. For example, the receiving point of irrigation channel is here, glacier is here. Glaciers are gradually moving down, slipping down. Now irrigation channel is high and glaciers feeding point is low. Because of that phenomena also such irrigation system dried out. Around 900 irrigation systems dried out partially or fully. Then there was big project of government, water and irrigation department. They helped local communities to revive together with AKRSP. There is one organization working in those areas. They together with government, they tried to revive those irrigation system. Another thing, interventions from other organizations like ICIMOD. In some places, such irrigation systems were dried. Now the water supply level is lower than the irrigation system. Now what we experimented, we pumped water using solar pumps. Can you imagine that high altitude glacier area solar pumps are used to pump water in those irrigation systems to somehow some way sustain agriculture activity, because no other option, because agriculture is 90% or 80% dependent on such systems. Yeah. I would also like to mention that in some parts, because of that slipping gradual process, some scientists attribute to climate change and some scientists they attribute to natural phenomena. So several villages and settlements at the risk. So somehow directly and indirectly governments they are trying to evacuate communities to other safer places. So that is another risk, not only to agriculture but lives and settlements in those areas.
This is Piyush. I had a question on this sort of revival that is happening where you're seeing abandoned farmlands being taken up for cultivation. Do you see in the medium term, do you see this as something that will persist? Or let's say once the markets or the economy sorts of peps up, people will again abandon and go back? That is question number one. Question number two is,
Piyush, can you repeat this question, please?
yeah,
I want to understand you.
Right. So you talked of how migrants, rather people returning to the villages, have started cultivating farmlands that were otherwise abandoned. So my question number one is that, do you see this continuing beyond the so-called post-COVID phase, let's say where the economy reestablishes itself? That is one. And second is that as an extension of this, have you also seen say revival of traditional irrigation systems or some other such aspects which go beyond individual land holding, which require community effort or a more community-based engagement? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your first question. Honestly, if my personal opinion, I am not foreseeing that process will sustain beyond COVID-19 or post-COVID-19, because that abundant land revival is driven by or enforced by the situation. This situation, because they don't have any option. When they will have option in post-COVID condition, better option, because agriculture has high opportunity cost. If they do other activity, non-agriculture activity or activity in other areas which gives more reward in terms of income, in same time people will prefer to out migrate. At this moment, market system, incentive system, policies are same. They are not changed significantly. Now they are forced to revive land, but post-COVID, I am not sure it will not continue. And another question was related to that revival of irrigation systems. Can you specify that question? Little more clarity I want on that question.
Sure. So, like you were talking of how some of these traditional irrigation systems have collapsed or have been abandoned. And now that people are, back in the village and have time on hand and are probably thinking of some of these things, have you also seen beyond farming people taking up some of these revivals of traditional systems? Thanks.
We don't have any evidence on that. I think Ghulam Muhammad participant is from that area which has hundreds of such irrigation system. He may report correctly, but we don't have any documented evidence. Because revival of irrigation system, such irrigation system needs some substantial efforts. If eroded by some hazard, or damaged because of governance or management issues, or dried up because of slipping of glaciers, it needs significant efforts of weeks or sometimes months. So we don't have any documented evidence on that. Ghulam Muhammad, I invite you to report if you have any evidence from your area on that.
Okay, many thanks.
Hello, hello.
Please.
Yeah, this is Shejuti again. Actually, this is not a question, just an observation that I want to say here. I work in Uttarakhand in India, in the Himalaya, in the hilly region of Uttarakhand. Recently, what I have observed after the COVID, the people from the plains, they have become more interested to shift to the mountain for health reason, for investing, for different reasons. Actually, there are many abandoned villages in Uttarakhand for where the whole village has actually migrated outside. Now, these village lands are now being purchased by the people who are mainly from the plain areas, so both for personal and commercial use. Now, this can have both positive and negative effect on the society of the mountain areas, which we have to understand in the long run. So I don't know about the other areas of Hindu Kush region, but this I have observed in Uttarakhand, that slowly the society, the social network of the mountain region is changing there from what it was there about 10 years before. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very important point. Ghost villages. We know in Uttarakhand hundreds of ghost villages. So I see more positive on this. You can say reverse migration. So if people are moving from urban areas to
Yes,
ghost villages, it will have more positive impacts. Revival of those villages, revival of agricultural land, or use of that land for economic purposes. So in the
okay.
future, after 5, 6, or 10 years, we don't know what will be the impact on natural ecosystems or solid waste management, or how much pressure it will put on water systems in Uttarakhand. But at this moment, I am seeing it very positive. If it's happening, it's very positive.
Okay, okay.
Okay, thank you very much. We have time for a last question or comment. So please, is your last chance.
It's me again. Perhaps I'll make a comment here while we wait to see if someone else wants to ask a question. This movement of lowland people to the mountains is very evident everywhere. It's happening in Italy, and Danilo and Michele can for sure confirm that, and is happening in many, many parts of the world. And this is happening in both developing and developed countries. I was recently talking to someone I work with, which is based in Aspen, Colorado, a very expensive area in the US, and she was telling me that the price of the houses, which was already very high, has tremendously increased because many rich people, wealthy people from lowland areas, from the United Nations, from the United States, are moving to Aspen and to other mountain areas, mountain villages, where the school system is good and where the infrastructures are pretty good, because they think it's safer than in the lowland areas. So the price now are totally unaffordable for local people. So the local people are not able to buy properties anymore. They were really expensive, and now they are totally unattainable. So the economic situation of the society is really changing because of this arrival of new people from the lowlands. So it's important because they are good taxpayer. So it's clear that the local administration will benefit from this arrival. But on the other side, the local life, the traditions will be quite disrupted by this. So it's interesting. I mean, I don't think we can play a role, but it would be interesting to to watch how these will modify the society and the activities in mountain areas, at least from our point of view. Thank you.
I'll just add one point to what Rosa Laura has mentioned. I think this is also the observation. I mean, she already mentioned that this is common in both developing and developed countries. And recently in last 2 years, and maybe earlier also, it was observed because we know that most of these mountain communities are very marginalized. They don't have enough money, and that is one of the reasons they're coming to lower altitudes to have their houses for better education or infrastructure or livelihood. So what is happening, because now these lowland area people think they have better opportunities in mountains, so they are continuously buying these lands. And in last 1 year, I have observed, because I also come from Western Himalayas and I'm a native, I have been continuously observing this movement in Western Himalayas. People are now asking for a proper land policy, so that people from lowland areas don't have this opportunity to buy cheaper lands, the higher altitudes. So those who have the domicile, being a mountain person, can only have this right to buy land and develop infrastructure. So I also personally think this will be a really relevant task, because if this continuous migration from lowland areas to highland happens, this will snatch out the opportunity of a lot of mountain people who are marginalized and have these first right on resources and land of these areas. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you so much. I'm in agreement of comments from both of you, Rosa Laura and other colleague. So one thing I would like to clarify on this point, yes, there is trend in our region also moving from plain areas to mountain areas, but to mountain urban centers. So seasonally people move, they go from hot, especially from hot plain areas to mountain urban centers. They spend summer there and they return back. The very interesting thing that our colleague highlighted related to ghost villages. That's interesting thing, because ghost villages mean nobody is there. A village on paper, on record is there, but nobody is living there. Ghost villages may be because of climate change, maybe because of socioeconomic aspiration, maybe because of vulnerability. People out migrated and villages are completely vacant. So movement of people from plain areas to those ghost villages, that is interesting thing. If people are moving, at least it will revive the villages and it will trigger some economic activities in mountain areas. Yes, other points are very important. Urbanization in mountain areas, that land rights are conflicts, that, and Rosa Laura's point is very important, the impact of mountain culture, that is also important. So I agree with both of you, but that point is very important if people are returning to ghost villages. And all
Yeah,
is well.
please, if I can add, this is especially happening
Excuse me.
in
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we are running out of time and we need to go forward for the next part of the course. And so if I invite you to keep your comment, maybe be shared with the other participant or also with the lecturer, but we need to stop for 5 minutes to test the connection with the next lecturer, and then we have to continue. So sorry again for this interruption, but we need to go ahead. So I would like to first of all thank you very much to Dr. Abid Hussain for this interesting and lively session of the IPROMO course. And thank you for all the questions from the participants. So now, okay, thank you very much. He shared in the chat tool his email, so you are invited to contact him directly. So thank you again, Abid. And now there is a 5-minute break, so we can test the connection with the next lecturer. And so see you in 5 minutes for the last part of the presentation. Thank you again, Abid.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, Abid.
Abid.
Thank you.
Okay, so I would like to welcome. I need your guidance for the pronunciation of your surname. I'm sorry, but I would like to pronounce it correctly. So
you can say Nijnik. If
Nijnik,
correctly,
okay.
it's Nijnik. But yeah, I'm also called Nijnik, which is also fine because I have lived in Netherlands and they always say Nijnik, and it's also fine. But originally it's Nijnik.
Nijnik. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, welcome everybody to this last but not least session of our IPROMO course. This will be zooming in the Carpathian from Professor Maria Nijnik. I'm sorry for the pronunciation. You try to teach me, but I'm not such a good student. Professor Nijnik is a natural resource, ecological and climate economist. She's a social scientist, and she works from the James Hutton Institute. She will lecture us on the topic of social innovation, and the lecture title is "Can Social Innovation Offer Transformative Opportunities to Marginalized Mountain Areas?" So I would like to thank you very much, Professor Nijnik, and I give her the floor. Please.
Thank you very much, Danilo, for introducing me. The structure of the lecture will be that I will introduce myself a little bit more, and also the James Hutton Institute and all other bodies that I represent, but very briefly. Then I will tell you about processes and challenges. You know them very well, I understand, but still in marginalized mountain areas as they are perceived here in Scotland, but also primarily in the Carpathian region, transition countries, also in the Mediterranean areas. I will speak about the role of social innovation in addressing these challenges and present to you the Horizon 2020 project, which is on social innovation in marginalized rural areas with a special focus on the Mediterranean areas. I will tell you more about workflow and main outputs of the CIMRA project, and then give examples of social innovation, examples in mounting settings, maybe to follow some good examples or to learn lessons from failures which also do exist. I will introduce you some innovative actions and innovative case studies in Scotland Highlands, where I'm located, and also will focus on the Carpathian Mountains I'm originally from, and will tell you of results and lessons learned, and with some concluding remarks and observations from this project and other activities I'm involved. So the James Hutton Institute is an international research center based in Scotland, and it is a main research provider to the Scottish government under its strategic research programs. Now we are preparing next program, research program for the resources called the Scottish government, and it is designed in a competitive grounds, but usually James Hutton is quite well known and well positioned, and we to a large extent funded by the Scottish government through this competitive application for grants. And we do eventually we contribute to adding value to meeting the goals, sustainable development goals of the UN. But on the ground, we do transdisciplinary research. We do natural and social science research, addressing challenges of food, land, and people. We also look at mountain areas because Scottish Highlands are very nearby our institute. You can see this is the map of the United Kingdom, this island, and over there, northeast of Scotland, is our institute, which has several departments. And I am, as Danilo, thank you, mentioned as principal scientists of social, economic, and geographical sciences group, and we try to reconnect people to the land and to the environment. Also, we do research, practice research, co-construct knowledge together with people, with policy, with business, and with local communities living in the area. I also represent United Kingdom Government Committee on Forest Science, for which I am a member, also advisory scientific board of the European Forestry Institute, but also, which is very important, I'm here standing for the Science for the Carpathian and the Carpathian Convention. Science for the Carpathian was formed, is a non-governmental organization, voluntary organization, so to say, of scientists coming together to deliver environmental protection objectives and to sustain the Carpathian region, support its resilience of social ecological systems, of communities living there, also ecological biodiversity. And scientific science for the Carpathian, this committee works very closely with the Carpathian Convention, and it is, as you maybe know, a legally binding framework of and also a stakeholder platform for various projects, including transboundary international projects in the region, but also it goes wider in its perspective. It was established in 2003 and entered in force 2006, so almost the same time with the Science for the Carpathians, and it was ratified by all 7 countries, but actually 2 more countries partly belong to the Carpathians, but I will tell more about the Carpathian Mountains a bit later. So also I represent the European Union Forest Research Organization, and it's EUFRO Unit 40505, which is about social innovation and entrepreneurship. And I will be talking today exactly about social innovation, how to make social ecological systems more resilient in marginalized areas, and how to sustain marginalized communities, left behind people in these areas. So we all know these turbulent times we live now with all the crisis, with the COVID. We also know very well of these 3 components, building blocks of sustainability: economic, social, and environmental. And these dimensions of sustainability, they are interlinked, and they should be well balanced for the whole social, ecological, economic system to develop towards sustainability. And for this, it needs to have green pathways to growth. Much depends on the right policies and government interventions, but also in various bottom-up movements. In red, you can see sustainability transition movements. People have come up with various bottom-up movements about social involvement, about resilience, green zero carbon economy, etc. With dirty pathways, you can see 230 gigatons of CO2 could enter the atmosphere by 2015, and it could lead to really better consequences for all of us. But what shall we do? So if economic growth, for instance, goes the same way, it has its limits. It could lead to resource scarcity, to excessive concentration of power and resources, to further problems related to globalization, problems with resource depletion, natural capital degradation, pollution. Various negative externalities could then be observed also concerning the environment. And in proper interaction of environmental and social components of sustainability, could provoke various hazards, diseases like COVID now, waste-related problems as we now have with plastic and other. Societal problems could include fuel poverty, marginalization of certain communities. Even in such well-developed countries as Scotland, we see fuel poverty in some places. The concern of human health is important, well-being. These all challenges are associated with this balance of this economic, social, and environmental components of sustainability. And they go across all scale, from strategic, global scale to local, and pretty much of the activities that could influence in the right direction the development of social ecological system depend on people living and working on the ground. So rather than maybe restore what's been before the COVID, because now the situation is really poor in many places concerning all these blocks of sustainability. So rather than restore, maybe to transform the cost of action to long-term sustainability in living with nature and using it, because we are part of nature. So we should understand that biodiversity conservation and climate neutrality means in the long run human prosperity. And it is crucial to enhance the resilience, sustainability, circularity, and inclusiveness of social and ecological systems, to reverse the cost of degradation of nature, to go for green, digital, and healthy future. And these are strategic tasks. They are identified by the UN, they are identified at European level and in national policies. These strategic tasks, they require changes on the ground, as I already mentioned. But are we committed and motivated? I mean, people on the ground. Do we have adequate capabilities and resources? And can, in the long run, COVID be a trigger to steer a more sustainable governance of social ecological systems? Can we live with nature being part of it? And can we also, from our linear interlinks with nature, go to circular, go to bioeconomy, circular bioeconomy, which could most likely provide great benefits and dividends to social ecological systems of which we are part. So there are changes are needed. They are strategic, but they are also local. And we see that social, while COVID could be a trigger and a catalyst of these changes, social innovation could be a means for steering sustainability transition in marginalized, left behind rural areas and communities. Social innovation opens new prospects to foster positive changes, especially it does it locally, and it promotes resilience of the systems. And the lecture will be about social innovation and its focus in marginalized mountain areas, while our project was about marginalized rural areas, so wider. So in marginalized rural areas, mountain areas, there are common problems with biodiversity, for instance, losses, problems with physical isolation. Biodiversity losses require maintenance, restoring of biodiversity and landscape values, promotion of multifunctionality. We need to go for more sustainable forest use and involve the knowledge of communities, local people, into designing sustainable solutions, forestry solutions. we should use digitalization, for instance, in physically isolated areas, and create various local businesses and opportunities. There are also various other problems like gaps between policies and implementation. Sometimes, very often, policy guidelines are very good and they support sustainability, they promote on paper, so to say, they promote various brilliant things for people and for the nature, but they don't really work. So this gap between policies and their implementation, their operationalization on the ground is a very important issue, and also capacity building to realize these policy targets on with the people and make their future and the future of the land and the environment they are working in and living in more sustainable and resilience. Also, there are issues of communication, building trust, especially in, for instance, in transition countries like Ukraine. I'm originally from Ukraine. Also mutual learning, understanding, knowledge exchange, which is now this lecture is part. Everything needs attention, and especially in such areas, the previous speaker mentioned about out-migration and aging of population, and it was highlighted before also in this series of lectures. Of course, population drift also goes from smaller villages to larger villages, and from larger villages to towns. It's kind of change circle, chain effect. And this leads, of course, to challenges like closure of services, closure of health services, for instance, or transport services. And not only in developing countries, I'm now thinking of the remote areas in Scottish Highlands. This also here, and it threatens capacity for endogenous advance. But for instance, in Scotland, what's good that retired people often return to their villages, bringing them their knowledge, bringing also financial resources, their social capital, sharing with people their knowledge. So it's a kind of also two ways. So there are challenges, but there are also new opportunities for new growth, so to say, also related, for instance, to diversification of businesses. Forestry is becoming very diverse. So it's not only focused now, it's multi-purpose, multifunctional. It's not only focused on timber as it was maybe 20 years ago, but it's also on recreation, a wide range of other ecosystem services. Tourism in the Scottish uplands, very popular, and you know, with whiskey distilleries known worldwide, and our beautiful landscapes and gaming, and also restructuring like forestry and agriculture coming together through developing of agroforestry, which is quite advanced in many developing countries, by the way, and also in former transition countries, and also changing infrastructure, which could be positive. For instance, with digitalization, infrastructure is not only building roads, but this is also important. But as to building roads, there are of course trade-offs. So we build roads. It's good for people perhaps to commute, to get to places where they can receive healthcare or something, or various other activities, but on the same at the same the other hand, it can be not very favorable for the environment, of course. But Again, on the positive side, building roads could alleviate the threat of forest fires, which will increase with the climatic changes. So there are always trade-offs between positive and negative sides of whatever, including changing infrastructure, and including with infrastructure, we don't mean only roads, but we mean also digitalization, IT, new technologies. So in remote areas, usually people have less access, not as good access to various internet connections or various other, even mobile phones not work fine in some areas. So all these changes we can take advantage of the opportunities that this new developments in mountain areas, marginalized mountain areas can provide us, but also we need to, of course, tackle the challenges. Changing lifestyles, again, we work more from home, we work more remotely, which is good. For instance, it's a splendid event which has gathered people from all over the world, and so this is because we can communicate from a long distance. We can use new technologies, but of course challenges in marginal areas still prevail, and they are of much burden to people in some areas. And to tackle these challenges, we can support small businesses, create new business models, promote local short food supply chain, as I already mentioned, support circular bioeconomy, also in forestry, but in agriculture and agroforestry, we can develop and exploit green spaces with regard to recreation, tourism, valorize ecosystem services. Also, we can use fiscal incentives to promote development of marginalized rural areas. This is done, for instance, in the funnels in some places with regard to taxation. But more recently, new collaborative actions like social innovation are coming up on the agenda of the European Commission and at the level of country governments. In forestry, social farming, healthcare, energy, tourism, nature conservation, social innovation is driving place-based rural development. In Scotland, under the government strategic research program, and in the EU under Horizon 2020 CIMRA project, which I coordinated, we investigated how social innovation arises, how it develops, what drives its success, how it can address numerous challenges still faced by marginalized rural areas. What is social innovation about? It is first of all about human well-being. It's about new relationships and collaborations between people. It is about innovative governance. It's about social cohesion and justice. It's about inclusion, of course. It's about sustainable, smart, and inclusive growth. Social innovation opens new social, economic, environmental opportunities. It responds to pressing social demands which are not traditionally addressed by existing institutions, including markets. I mean, in some marginalized areas, public funding may be lacking, and markets not functioning for public goods, and there are various externalities. We can't use markets to guide proper allocation of resources across space and time for all ecosystem services that are provided by our nature. And in such circumstances, in particular, social innovation can open new opportunities, which can add value to already existing, of course, policy, public policy, I mean, and market incentives to promote sustainability of social ecological systems. CIMRA was designed to improve understanding of social innovation and how to enhance it in rural settings across Europe, and with a particular focus on the Mediterranean region, including of North Africa. We had 26 partners from 16 countries. It was a huge project, just finished now. The purpose was to define, to conceptualize, categorize social innovation and linked governance mechanisms, to explain the variability and diversity of social innovation across Europe and beyond, to analyze triggers, enabling factors, stakes factors, and challenges and barriers for developing and for initializing, developing, and spreading out of social innovation, and then together with people on the ground to support social innovation, addressing specificities and priorities of social needs and new social relationships and collaboration. Building capacities for social innovation by bringing scientists, businesses, government, civil society together to create sustainable solutions to most pressing social demands. We used a transdisciplinary approach. We combined theoretical knowledge from various scientific organizations. We also bring on board empirical and expert knowledge, as well as traditional knowledge and local wisdom of people working in marginalized rural areas in various countries, 16 countries, but also we communicated wider because we had, I will tell you later on, provide link to our digital platform. We communicated also with people through digital platform and our website. So the outreach of CIMRA and its impact was very huge, impressive. We also used multi-level, multi-actor engagement. So first we had a scientific advisory board. Then so these are experts in the field. It consisted with social innovation think tank, sorry. It consisted from scientific advisory board, prominent scientists in the area, in this field area, and also stakeholder engagement board, politicians at higher level, but also at a local level, but to advise us how to move forward, how to reach our targets in this project. We then have one more layer of engagement with people and local communities on the ground. And it was done through case studies and also through innovative actions, which we initiated and implemented in 7 innovative actions. And then we went through this digital platform of interaction with people beyond Europe and beyond this area. So we were doing things with people and doing these things for people to co-construct together and then to evaluate decisions for our common and more sustainable futures. We went from system knowledge, input phase, of planning our case studies, data collection, organizing social innovation think tank, bringing together scientific lab, laboratory, and stakeholder lab into living labs of this project to do things jointly. Then we went through the transformation knowledge through active learning, analyzing, reflecting, mapping, modeling, and to the target knowledge, to synthesize our knowledge, to make impact, to advance knowledge, to build capacities, and have some outlook for the future beyond the project duration. So I already mentioned we established social innovation think tank consisting of scientific advisory board and stakeholder engagement board. Then we conceptualized social innovation. So we spent much of time on defining what is social innovation. It seems an easy question, but for this particular project, it took us quite long, and through consultation with people on the ground, with our scientific advisory board, we then define what's social innovation, which is workable for this particular project. And we conceptualized social innovation. What does it mean? Like a framework, developed a framework of social innovation and of its development, how it evolves, how it develops. Then we analyzed marginalized rural areas and classified marginalized rural areas, and we analyzed various social innovation examples. We created database of examples of social innovation, which is the most diverse, of course, the largest, but also largest is not always the most important. I mean, not everything which is huge is valuable, but it's also very diverse, and it has some unique examples of social innovation not discovered earlier. And then we went to evaluation framework. It was done by the University of Padua, by the way. So Italian guys with Laura Secco, Davide Petronella team, maybe many of you know them. So they worked on evaluation framework and designing. Of course, everybody helped and been involved, all 26 partners almost. And a set of evaluation methods, a toolkit was developed also to help evaluators at the European NRD and at the European level to evaluate cases of social innovation. Then we, oh, sorry, we went to case studies, and we worked with local stakeholders, and together with them, we analyzed social innovation for the purpose of, for the scientific purpose, for the purpose which to provide this new knowledge and recommendations, guidelines to policymakers and communities of practice, which I mean local stakeholders, but also businesses, also various partnerships. And also we created innovation actions on the ground, which is a little bit slightly different than case studies because we are more active in innovation actions. Then we had MOOC, this open course, as I understood. This is also MOOC, open course for many people to attend who are interested. But we also held a course in Saragossa in face-to-face course. It was before the COVID pandemic. And we provide guidelines to policymakers and communities of practice, and various events were held, and dissemination was quite, and impact was durable, hopefully, and with quite a lot on dissemination. But the first step was this definition. I was saying it was not easy to define, but finally we arrived to the definition, which is the social innovation is the reconfiguration of social practices in response to societal challenges, which seeks to enhance outcomes on societal well-being and necessarily includes the engagement of civil society actors. So social innovation are new ideas, new products, services, modes, models, arrangements, relationships, interactions, attitudes, collaborations, values, behaviors, skills, practices, but also fields of activities like social entrepreneurship, social enterprises, and processes, learning, social learning to meet societal needs. So we think that to compare with other definitions, that social innovation are both, is both practices, processes, I mean the dynamics, but also results of these practices and processes. And very important that is for people, and it's together with people, necessarily include engagement with civil society actors. So when we analyzed how social innovation evolves, we very many papers have been published. You can have a look on our website. I will provide on various dimensions of this research. But we, of course, highlighted that social innovation, as any other innovation, begins with ideas, then it develops into prototypes, then pilots. It can become more stable, it can spread. Okay, it may not be definitely spread. It could also fail, but it could upscale to other areas, or it could upscale at the level and or outscale to other areas, replicate, and you can see this various types of colony or satellite formation or modular, polycentric or viral expansion of social innovation to other areas. And it can deepen, of course, and may create a systematic change. Either the change at a local level, which is more often, or change at a broader level, beyond local case studies or places where it was initiated. So it has a dynamic, the reconfiguration of social practices is dynamic from ideas, you see, to growth, expansion, and then implementation, upscaling, and then it could lead to adaptation, it could lead to transformation. Transformation means radical changes. So like institutional changes, radical, or it can, of course, not spread. It can just vanish. Yeah. We have this database that we created, contained 450 examples of social innovation, and 243 examples were validated. It means that we validated it, so it should, we had criteria for validation, which was in line with the definition of social innovation. So it should involve reconfiguration, it should be for people, it should involve people, social actors, it should, and we had this criteria, and each example of social innovation we got 450 was validated according to this criteria. In Scotland, we got 30 examples in rural areas of Scotland, for instance. And then you will see that social innovation examples concern rural development. Our project was about rural development, about also agriculture and forestry and anything in between. So we had social innovation concerning tourism, renewables, agroecology, and various other, for instance, social farming, care, social care. And we had also 24 case studies of different levels. You will see on this map our case studies. A, B, and C is the level how deeply we analyze these case studies with a methodology developed to analyze social innovation before it happens, then how it goes, and then post. So one probably is missing. We also had in Guadeloupe, but it's not on the map. Yeah. And we have 7 innovation actions, which mean that we are involved in not only observers like analyzing case studies, we analyzing what's going on there, but in innovation actions, our team members were actively involved in not really doing something for people, but in advising capacity, in sharing our knowledge, their capacity building and social learning, but also, frankly speaking, providing some ideas in which direction based on our successful case studies and examples we have got on positive changes that have happened after an innovation action took place. So how and where to go and how it could be achieved. So these were 7 innovative actions. One of them, one of the strengths was care farming, which is, as you see, widespread in Europe. Examples of care farming are quite diverse also in the United Kingdom. Sometimes they called care farming or social farming or green care. They are based on the same philosophy or similar philosophies, but different activities and different actors and different target groups. Some are meant, for instance, for elderly people, which are most popular, probably, but also for disabled people, so marginalized people and marginalized in marginalized areas. The majority of UK examples of social innovation of care farming are located in Scotland. So I'm having now maybe break, yes, and then I will tell you about social innovation in Scotland, starting from Scotland and going through Europe from Scotland to the Carpathian Mountains, and then it will be the end of my talk with providing some good examples and lessons learned and some conclusions. If you have some questions, maybe, yes, Danilo, maybe right now we have maybe 5 minutes before break, but then I need some break for my voice to come back to.
Okay, absolutely. So there are some questions in the chat room. If it is fine for the participants who have posted them, I invite let's say 2 questions, but I encourage the participants, I will call them to submit directly the question to you. So first of all, there is Pranay. If you wanna submit directly your question, please.
Yeah, I can read. Then I will stop sharing. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So okay, yeah. Great.
Yeah. Okay.
So you can have a little break.
Yeah.
Then for sure we will have a 5-minute break, so you can rest a little bit.
My mouse for some reason not working. Okay. I was answering. Or maybe you can read easier. No, I can end sharing, but end show. Okay, I will end show and go to.
But do you need help for stopping the sharing?
Yeah.
Okay, I can.
So now I can look into the chat, right? Because if sharing, then it's
Okay.
not easy.
I removed you from the privilege of speaker. Then I will give you back after the break.
Yeah,
So
thank you. Yeah, So chat, the initiative looks very useful for development, social innovation in the country. This seems like itself an innovation. I have a question. Do the impact investment and assessment being done for the projects? So I'm not quite sure which initiative was very useful. I don't think I shared any initiative, not yet. But if it's this question applies to me, probably it does. So impact investment, so social innovation is not about really investment, I mean impact investment as such, because its final goal is not profit maximization, or it's not profit driven, or all the resources which are obtained through crowdsourcing, for instance, or various donations to keep the innovation, social innovation going, are supposed to provide benefits for communities like healthcare, provide employment, provide nice places for recreation, but not investment is not, we considered, of course, how with regard to sustainability, economic sustainability. So each innovation should receive some funding, of course, to sustain itself. So with this regard, yes, we looked at this resilience, so to say, of self-supporting, but not of profit maximizing, not of with regard to, as usual, enterprises. It's more like social enterprises. It works for the people on the ground to provide benefits.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Maria. It's Pranay here. Okay. Actually, I was trying to focus on your initiative, just like the initiative is all about you are bringing all the collective, all the collection of the social innovation in one place, and you are coming with a think tank. It is also itself innovation. I was trying to say that thing, because you are doing something different, because we don't have in our country that you are doing such a way that is itself an innovation. And second thing,
that's what you mean. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, it was.
Second thing, each and every social innovation or any innovation that need to be scale up, or that need to be go towards the systemic change, or go towards the policy making things. So in this regard, okay, just like if you see any entrepreneur, social entrepreneur, he come out with a solution for his society. Maybe that is digital, maybe that is non-digital solution. But in one point, if the solution is tested, prototype, and in one point, it will come in one point that it need to be scale up, or it will go down. So in that point, they need an impact investor. They need a big investor, maybe a government investor, or any source of investment. Why I'm focusing on impact investment? Because the impact investors are such investors, those who are trying to bring some environment sustainability things to the society. The big houses or foundations, they are trying to come out with some investment policy that is called impact investment. I think you are aware of that. So nowadays, if any social innovation want to outburst or make a big changes in the society, or maybe scale up all over the world, then he needs something that's like a big investment. So that is called.
Yes, but I'm not really promoting now. I see your point, and I would agree on many occasions, especially when marginalized areas are concerned, and when investment and growth is needed. And these theories of degrowth and that you should not invest, you should just save and just, I'm not pretty much in favor at the global level. I think it can work in those countries which have already developed quite highly and where the nature is not, but in marginalized areas, I think people still need development, and I would agree with you on that. But I would not be thinking that to create bigger and larger, it's there is always some tipping point, first of all. So not everything that, and if you remember my slide, how social innovation evolves, so it's a spiral growth, and then so it's not going linear, right? And also there are different types. I would also agree completely, it needs to spread in any way, but it's not always out scaling, it's not always growing, but it could be like replicating. So here, for instance, we can use example and implement in other similar place, like in the Carpathian Mountains, or other place. So it spreading could go, there are various development paths. We have just published a paper on developing paths of social innovation in Sociologia Ruralis. Maybe I pronounce also not correctly, but Sociologia Ruralis journal, and we show how it can spread. It's very important, but it's not just grow, and it's yeah, there are various, it's context specific and case specific, I would say, but it's important, it's very important.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now it's time for a 10-minute break, if it is fine for you, and then we'll come back for the last part of the lecture. So see you in 10 minutes.
Yeah, thank you.
So please. We cannot hear you.
Do you see me? No. No.
We can hear you now.
Okay, it's most important. Okay, I will provide now some examples of social innovation, and I will start with examples in Scotland, in Aberdeen. You will see where I live, and here Aberdeen is, and these examples are from marginalized rural areas in Scottish uplands over there. And the first example is about social innovation in Braemar. It's a village of 400 people. It's one of the most remote villages in Deeside, Dees, the river, in the Cairngorms National Park. It's often cut off by bad weather and has poor public services concerning transport or health services. It has a grid connection often when it's stormy and when heavy rains and winds quite common here. Also, it has energy poverty and earlier population decline is a feature of this area, but with some retired people or second home owners having this, I mean, people working in Aberdeen, for instance, but having their second home in this marginalized area, also live there, but overall population is declining, and there is a need to retain especially young people in this area. And opportunities not pursued by private sector, and of course, public funding always limited as everywhere. So what did people do? So they established community development trust to oversee projects through feasibility studies and advising. Community development trusts are the main type of body in Scotland supporting grassroots level community initiatives like social innovations. They provide an umbrella organization of interested and informed local people, including these retired and newcomers who are prepared to commit time and their social capital, their knowledge to helping local people to develop their villages economically, socially, and environmentally. This Braemar village really combines newcomers and people who own their second homes there, but also local people which are commonly quite old. And this development trust, Braemar Community Ltd, is at the heart of what is happening in this village. Its website can also tell you, I can provide about this company, which was established as a charity. It was formed in 2004 to undertake the development and operation of major local projects that would benefit the community living there. Projects include the development of Braemar Castle, you can see here, and visiting it's a visiting attraction. The building of 2 footbridges to develop recreation, also restoration of croft settlement, also social care, and the development of hydropower scheme. They exploited strong social capital, a mix of local people and newcomers to create this vibrant community willing to innovate. Each social enterprise is helped by the community trust, but then it becomes independent. Here you can see this development restoration projects, visitor attraction they did. They also help elderly people with health care, but very interesting project was hydropower scheme. Opening this hydropower scheme and opening Braemar Castle as a visiting attraction created jobs in the community. The footbridge opening helps create circular walks around villages, and restoration of settlement provides another point of attraction and interest for tourists, and including international tourists. All help Braemar to be more attractive place for both local people, but also for international and national recreation and tourism development. Trust, this development trust, it's always at the center of any social innovation in Scotland, helps until project becomes viable and sustainable, more or less. For instance, the hydropower plant was developed as a community cooperative, and it has now 200 shareholders. They crowdfunded the scheme, and the Prince of Wales formally opened the scheme in 2016. And the shareholders will get return on their investment, what was asked by by one of your colleagues, and the community will benefit. The fund will generate about $500,000 for the community over the life, the duration of the scheme. So, which is quite enough to sustain this community initiative, which could also support other projects developed in this village, and also could eliminate shortage of electricity and other provide employment. Also, The Braemar locally owned and managed social enterprise is meant to replace the existing care system for elderly people in the village. Care workers were wasting their time in long journeys from Inverness, but also Aberdeen to work with elderly people, and were coming sometimes in times not really convenient for elderly people, or sometimes weather conditions didn't allow them to come. So it was quite hectic and not very convenient by both carers, I mean, from public service, NHS, it's national service in Scotland, in the UK. And then two local women decided to establish a new scheme that will make social enterprise in a way to create additional jobs in the village and take care of elderly people, take care of them in time which suits both the elderly people and these volunteers. So it was a voluntary work. Also helping them shopping and gardening. I mean, for instance, these volunteers could be retired doctors, retired healthcare people who then decided to live in the village, or who had their second home in the village, or whatever the options could be. But in this village, it was just retired for elderly professional caretakers decided to organize such a social enterprise. And Community Development Trust, usually, as mentioned, support these initiatives, providing knowledge, providing where from you can attract seed money to start the initiative. And then when project established, like this community hydropower plant, then community trust could switch major attention to some other project, or could then help when it's really needed. Another example is Lokaran, also a remote area with very similar conditions as Braemar. It was quite far away, 2 hours drive from the first town, large town, we can say, not probably the city. It was with aging population, medical desertification and fuel poverty, youth unemployment, and shortage of young people, also lack of affordable housing. And so the situation needed to be changed. And then people, so it was again bottom-up initiative. In Inverness, the closest place was 2 hours drive, but then the agreement was between the Highland Council and Albion Housing Health Centre about, and also to establish medical service and care home and daycare for elderly, using the resources and knowledge and also wishes, motivation of local people living there. And it was established, healthcare social enterprise was established, and it covers people not only from Lokaran, but also from nearby villages. Also, there is a place for people to meet, to host events like social club, but driven from people rather than from solely from municipality. I mean, there is also library. People bring books there from their homes. They exchange books. Bus service from and to Inverness to this nearest city was also provided by to people. So it multiple benefits: reduced isolation, improved health and well-being, also family-friendly situations, people collaborate, they don't feel lonely, and it also provides employment. 25 part-time jobs have been developed, and so multiple benefits for people living in the area and also living in the nearby areas. Another example from Lokaran is concerns Lokaran Community Development Company. It's a community-run organization, and one of the, so again, there are multiple projects. Projects include, you will see, it's about pottery, about wood turner, about woodland crops, local employment, income, and well-being have been improved. There are corners for people to meet, to communicate, craft center, willow weaving, dry stone walling, tree pruning, redeployment of the wood, multifunctionality, heritage education. Everything is has started, maybe not booming, but revitalizing. And one of the most important initiative was the purchase of woodland through natural forest land scheme, so which allows communities now in Scotland to purchase woodlands and to make it community woodlands. Community woodland scheme is a type of social innovation now very prominent in Scotland. So these people in Lokaran, they purchased woodland, and they decided to diversify woodland to maximize benefits for people and to make it community land with all associated assets for the benefit of community and the public in general, for people who come there. They also advanced education concerning woodlands, culture, history, also some education for kids, and they also plan to advance the arts, heritage, culture, and science. And the most recent project was also about cheese, and yeah, it's something to do with the production of environmental friendly milk, dairy products, and cheese. So this is their new initiative. So you can see that people are trying to really make changes on the ground, as especially in such countries where policies, where also governance system is promoting and encouraging people to do it. So very important, of course, for the policies to be participatory, inclusive, and to help people on the ground at the level of municipalities, but also at the higher level. There are some grants actually to start the ball moving also from the European Commission. There are various funding bodies which can provide seed money for such initiatives. But overall, what makes it work? So of course, these are dedicated volunteers with vision. So especially the first to start it, you need to be really motivated, to have the idea, to know how to create innovative process, to have some brainstorming, to have some capability for doing it, and to design innovative projects, which would be in demand for people, but also would be beneficial for the environment and with regard to all these dimensions I mentioned in the beginning, social, economic, and environmental. Skills are very important, so only dedication is not everything. Very important is to have, for instance, a full-time community development officer with his or her knowledge, and also with strong networks, various networks, public, private networks within community, networks from community to nearby community, and further on to establish, to develop social learning, to engage people and to make changes viable, practical. Of course, financing is important, and there are various like lottery fund, for instance, in Britain, very popular to attract initial funding. But there are other sources, so it differs, of course, in different countries. They're different, but maybe common for all of us, maybe not all, could be European Union funds. Also to look for new opportunities, like this new opportunity now has come up with regard to cheese production to the Lokaran. It was initiated in a nearby village, in a neighboring village, but now, like someone asked, it has spread. It has started replicating. It's not yet there. And alternative business models. Again, as I was asked, there is a need to self-sustain and self-support to be long, if not long-lasting, then to be resilient. And a good example is this Braemar hydro plant, which can show that it's possible. Alternative business models and non-for-profit social enterprises are possible, and they can be resilient in some cases if these ideas, motivation, means, and capabilities are not only financially, but if there are incentives for them to evolve further and to spread, not only financially, but also, for instance, there could be kind of fatigue of, so to say, of community management development officer. Maybe she is tired of that. She got another matters to solve, family, or just maybe so many ideas. They at some point they can come to an end, and maybe someone, some successor should come and with new ideas, or somehow to trigger new ideas. We also analyzed it in CIMRA, various triggers, enabling factors, but also, of course, challenges are important. As to innovative actions, very interesting innovative action is integrating refugees in Scotland. I can be regarded as one. I have come to Scotland 20 years ago, joined this institute, but I don't mean I was for employment, but there are many people coming as refugees, not employed, not in search of their employment, and especially with regard to such countries as Ethiopia, Eritrea, Sudan, Iran, and Syria. This initiative of integrating refugees has become quite, is becoming quite successful. And refugees are effectively integrated into Scottish society, and they are able to exercise their rights and they have their needs met. It's a gradual process, of course, and it's a unique partnership led by the Scottish Refugee Council with British Red Cross, with Glasgow Clyde College and other organizations, but also with local people, just with community members. And they for now dedicated for 12 months to support people who are granted refugee or other status following an asylum claim. One of the projects is in my area, so I'm in Aberdeen. It's Aberdeenshire. It's remote rural areas, so not city of Aberdeen. But two innovative actions were created. One, Amal Hope project, socially integrated 150 Syrian refugees. How was it initiated? It came up with from the establishment of the committee consisting of 4 men and 4 women. They took control. They were elected to take control, responsibility, and the opportunity to enable families to contribute to the community on the concept of collective good and not for profit action. So they're now integrating, communicating. They're now coming together. It's again like a social club, enabling families to do something jointly. And 2 projects were initiated. The kitchen project. The place was at the community center. The council offered the refugees opportunity to cook Arabic and provide food to newly arriving people, also to the Scottish community more generally. And another project was garden project. It's a place for refugees to mingle with locals at the garden. They were given a lot of land for their use, and to grow vegetables, fruits, to practice their language skills, also help their experience in language skills, and so in meaning that they can apply for future work if they remain in Aberdeen, hopefully in Aberdeenshire for a long time, or in general forever. Innovative actions. Oh, sorry. Pardon? Yeah. So they, of course, promote community development, participation. People exchange their experience. They communicate. It's not integration. The word integration, actually, I'm not too happy with this word in its direct translation. So it's not integration, like it's integration by adding your culture into the general lot of culture which exists in this area, this people. It's adding value to culture and to knowledge, to traditions of this area, and helping to make this culture even more diverse and more unique, probably. So I don't know which word would be better to use, but it's a kind of integration of them into this community, but also kind of integration the community into, so it's a joint process, 2 ways for the common value to enrich each other and to develop further, and to be more resilient, more independent, and also to advocate, for instance, for the unmet needs of refugees better. And coming from Scotland to a very different area of the Carpathian Mountains. because I was invited to give this talk as scientific member of scientific steering committee of for the Carpathian Mountains. So, and I was born here, so my heart is partly here, and it's the largest and most fragmented mountain area in Europe, stretching over 450,000 kilometers. It provides essential ecosystem services in 7 countries, but also beyond. But even in the Carpathian area, in addition to these countries, there is also a little bit part of Serbia, a little bit of Austria, but formally considered 7 countries. 7 countries signed the Carpathian Convention, and this is a unique place, genuinely unique, because it's a biodiversity reservoir for all Europe, and it has a unique recreational and living ecosystem services provision, and it's in the heart of Europe. The geographical center of Europe, by the way, lies in the Ukraine. So a very little bit about mountains. Carpathian Mountains have, as to Europe, unique and very expanded area of natural and semi-natural forests, and including virgin ancient beech forests. And large of this area, large part of this area is protected. There are also different zones of the protection, but I will not talk about that. There are plenty of species, so very rich, and the largest carnivore population in Europe, including wolves and bears. Of course, it's also a source of fresh water, and overall, it keeps the balance, also carbon balance, because it's a stock carbon sequestration and storage by trees growing there. It's a unique reservoir of carbon storage, and because tree planting is encouraged actually in this region still. So natural regeneration plus plantation forests on clear-cut places, but not steep steep slopes. So when tree grows, of course, it also sequesters carbon. Most of European remaining intact rivers and wetlands are also located there. But most importantly, it's biodiversity and last wilderness area still existing in Europe. We had one project here. You can see it's Darwin project supported by the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs of the UK that we conducted in the Carpathian Mountains, so between Ukrainian colleagues, and in the Carpathian Biosphere Reserve, the center of which is in the Carpathian and was led by the James Hutton. There are some social innovation initiatives in the Carpathian Mountains, but as I already mentioned, there should be supportive environment, policy environment, supportive institutional environment and governance. So it's not as easy to for them to develop. There are initiatives, but they are not at a quite advanced level of development, but they are more at their initial stage. For instance, the village of Isa in Transcarpathia is famous for its wicker products. Then there's again cheese, traditional Carpathian high cheese producers. Also ecotourism and the promotion of local culture is in Transcarpathian region. There are also, three projects we mentioned in our recent publication in a sustainability journal. These are three Svedovets. This is a social innovation initiative to oppose the construction of a huge touristic resort in the area, and to promote traditional land use and small-scale rural development instead. This is quite now in the media. If you look into the Carpathian Mountains and what's there, so it's really a hot topic now. We mentioned in this first paper is the scope of social innovation in Ukrainian forestry, and we mentioned this social initiative. Also, we mentioned the initiative of Forza, which means which is based on partnership between forestry enterprises like which are state forest enterprises in Ukraine. So state government, governed by the state in a way, local agencies, I mean, and local people. So kind of joint governance of woodlands through the partnership. It's an interesting initiative. And also Forest Watch, which is meant also driven by local people, which come together, try to protect forests from illegal logging, illegal this type of activity, shadow activity in forests, really yeah, I should not be saying maybe bad or negative impressions from what's going on, but this biodiversity and ecosystem services in the Carpathian area are quite threatened by illegal logging and by cutting of trees, using various other as if it's illegal, but making it, I mean, by adjusting their logging operations to the rules. But in fact, I can tell you more maybe later on about that, or I can email or provide some initiatives. This lecture shouldn't be about this, but it is about social innovation, that people come together to stop, like forest guards, and they gained their capabilities. They learned from forest managers, they took courses, they were trained, for instance, to understand which logging, which operations, forest operations are legal, what can be done, what can't be done, how to distinguish, what to do if you face someone who is doing that, which is prohibited by the law. So they learn together with state forest agency people, but then, or in parallel rather, they use these skills to prevent forests from mining. So recommendations for Carpathian region, we had now the Forum Carpathicum. Maybe you knew a month ago we had Forum Carpathicum, which is a conference which is held each second year with different in different places of this 7 Carpathian countries. And but now we had this conference remotely, and representatives from the Carpathian Convention, of course, were at the heart of this event with the United Nations Environmental Program. And we prepared, the scientific committee prepared recommendations for Carpathian region with regard to social innovation. And we think that social innovation and innovative governance are to be a force to promote sustainable development in the Carpathians and to help reduce marginalization and to do it together with people. And that the most important is for scientists is to analyze, design, and ensure the ways of how public and private sectors and various partnerships and various collaborations can enhance, scale up, scale out, or spread social innovation. Very important is to strengthen the role of local self-government in natural resource management. And this is now promoted in new government regulation to promote in Ukraine self-government in natural resource management and support communities initiatives. It's also promoted, it has started to be promoted at the national level. So most likely then this bottom-up initiatives have more chances to success if they are supported by policies and governance at the national level and the level of regions. Attention is to be given to consideration of enablers and barriers to answer the question how social innovation can deliver transformative opportunities to people and social ecological systems. So for people to live with nature and to use it sustainably, and for the social ecological systems to be resilient. And we suggested also to define what is social innovation in the Carpathian context. In each country, for CIMRA, we have such definition, but in the Carpathian context, for instance, the definition of social, excuse me, social innovation could be not completely, but quite a different one. Then to create a Carpathian database of example of social innovation. Our CIMRA project was focused on the Mediterranean area, not the Carpathian. We didn't have a Carpathian case study or Carpathian. Only we have in the database, people provided examples. So we have a couple of examples of social innovation existing in the Carpathians. I shared some of them. But we didn't analyze, like we had 24 case studies. None of these case studies was in the Carpathian. There was one initiative with regard to carbon forestry in Slovakian part of the Carpathians. But so we think that it is good to have a database of examples of social and social ecological innovation, maybe under the Carpathian Convention platform, to popularize and share positive examples, to advance the knowledge of social innovation, and to create a workable network between successful cases and between scientists and local experts, between traditional knowledge and scientific knowledge, and provide and extend opportunities for wider transboundary cooperation in this region and for diffusion, spreading of social innovation elsewhere. And very important is also to create tools for dissemination of scientific results. These tools could be used by regional, local policymakers and also other stakeholders. We can maybe publish some policy briefs, guidelines. We produced in CIMRA guidelines, one for practitioners, community of practice, meaning local people, businesses, various private-public partnerships. So everything to do with decision-making on the ground, so to say. And then policy guide for policymakers, including governance, various authorities. So governance and policy guide. And also very important is to look how and where from financial support, seed money, first of all, to start this innovation and to boost its development, where from it can be raised, this support. I mean, to enhance the emergence and growth of such social innovation and help with this success and with this resilience. CIMRA has improved understanding of what is social innovation, how it can help revive communities and bring prosperity to marginalized rural areas, including mountains, but also we classified marginalized areas wider. This can be also islands. There were also criteria for categorizing an area, whether it's remote or whether it's marginalized or not. So remoteness was, of course, one of the criteria. And mountain areas appeared largely a part of marginalized rural areas in this region, which we analyzed, the European region, Mediterranean area, and northeast of Africa. And then we explained how social innovation can be initiated. It can be driven by some brilliant idea of someone who arrived the marginalized area, and then created some co-team and motivated. Maybe he or she had his own money to go ahead, and then. But it could also be initiated by some challenges and even disastrous situations. Something like something has happened and people need to support themselves. They need to do something. So from some hardship, from some event, it could also arise, and then it needs to be supported to spread, to develop and spread. How to build capacities and develop collaboration to promote social innovation. And CIMRA also demonstrated the potential for social innovation to lead through transformative changes. But in the majority of cases still, social innovation appeared to be more of a local level rather than national. But in Scotland, this example of communal forestry is an example when communal forest ownership, from just one example, it has spread, and this idea has influenced even policymakers, so that the new natural forest land scheme was then initiated by, was then developed by the government to help people to promote this community forest ownership development. So this is an example how from one place social innovation can spread through outscaling, but also upscaling, because from local level it spread to the national, but also outscaling from one locality to another. But saying all this, that CIMRA has done a lot, and there are other projects, of course, ongoing. Some of them also led by the James Hutton, some with the involvement of our organization, like Project Desira on digitalization, and Sherpa, for instance, project. They are also this type of projects promoting local initiatives, living labs, so to say, for them to make changes. And Desira is also about digitalization and promoting digital wealth in marginalized areas. But for instance, does social innovation fit into system approaches of developing and operationalizing of bioeconomy, and how to make it a means or a tool for developing bioeconomy, which is now a very, especially circular bioeconomy, which is now a very important issue. How to make social innovation projects more efficient, for instance? What are the development paths which are more suitable in this location? It's of course case and context specific. How to empower social innovation actors for the development of solutions on climate, which is now very important, and also environmental challenges, but also health well-being with regard to the COVID pandemic, and mental health, which is very important now. What are the perceptions and motivations of social innovative actors while initiating and sustaining of social innovation? And these are research issues which I think would be nice to explore in a future research. We are now submitting also Horizon Europe, preparing Horizon Europe project on marginalized actually areas. So maybe something will be answered during this, over the duration of this project. Also, there are practical challenges for people to answer on the ground, and maybe scientists could help in doing it. So I see science in the center, and policy, science and community of practice, they should interact and to make the changes. What is the way through? How to maybe limit our dependence on volunteers, or how to encourage them to keep going, or to have succession in volunteering. How to avoid the situation when, for instance, social innovation communities can be victims of their success. How to avoid this situation? Yeah, maybe we don't have much time, but I can give an example. It's really an issue. Also funding, initial funding seed and matching funds. What is the adequate scale and size? So not spreading maybe, but spreading could be thin. So not always what is huge is better. So we should, for each case and context specificity, there should be adequate scale and size of innovation project. How to anyway foster social innovation to somehow be either replicated or spread out? It's very important as well. And new relationships between citizens, communities, public-private bodies are to be encouraged, because these partnerships are at the center. They are very important, as well as social capital and social learning. Different countries are at different stages in developing support structures for social innovation. And we need to find solutions in countries where the policy architecture for social innovation is least developed and civil society capacity is weaker, by supporting training visits and exchanges to best practices exemplars. We had our course, MOOC course of CIMRA. There are also various multi-actor platforms, CIMRA, Sherpa Desire, running projects, and also peer-to-peer learning on social innovation. And also a good example is this course, which is really, I would think, useful in capacity build, in promoting capacity building and social learning, also between lecturers and the audience. So this is our mutual learning, learning from each other. So thank you for your attention. It would be everything. This is my email. If someone wants to contact, I am very happy to hear from you. Written maybe questions, if not today, ask today. And also this is my website, and I'm grateful to participants from local case studies and the CIMRA colleagues, and especially from the UK partner organizations and CIMRA work packages, and of course to the funding bodies, the European Commission and the Scottish Government for funding or supporting our research, deeper research in Scotland. And here is also the web link to the CIMRA platform website. And we were active now, a bit less active because the project finished on Twitter and other media platforms. Thank you for your attention. It's everything from me for today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor Nijnik, for your presentation. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, there is no time for questions now, and I need 1 minute for an announcement concerning the closing ceremony. I would like to remember to all the participants that on Monday there will be the closing ceremony where you will be on the stage, and all the group have to present the working group presentation that with the task I have assigned you in the first day in the opening ceremony. So I would like to ask, if possible, to send me by email the presentation file at least 1 hour before the closing ceremony, so you have plenty of time to work on it on the next days. And I would like to not so gentle remind to those participants who don't have already sent their personal presentation. I remind you that it is mandatory for every participant to send the personal presentation as it is one of the tasks to complete for achieving the diploma of the course. So again, remember to send me the personal presentation, and 1 hour before the closing ceremony, remember to send me the working group presentation. Then on the closing ceremony, you will be instructed on how to present and so on. So thank you again, Professor Nijnik, and I would like to invite everybody to open the webcam and say thank you very much for our lecturer, and see you on the closing ceremony. Thank you very much. And
Thank
bye-bye.
you. Thank you, and good luck to everybody. Success with your social innovations in your regions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prof.
And also with the final exam and the final ceremony. See you next time. Please email me.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. It was a very good
Bye-bye.
presentation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.